Good evening and welcome to the Commemorative Air Force's Warbird Tube webinar for this evening. I'm your host, Steve Buss, and very glad that you could join us tonight. This webinar series is made possible by the Commemorative Air Force, and you can support the CAF through membership or donations. For details on how you can further CAF's mission to educate, inspire, and honor, please visit our website at commemorativeairforce.org. Now, as you enjoy tonight's presentation, questions may come to mind. If you have a question, just type it in the chat box, and we'll save time at the end to answer those questions. I'm very honored tonight to be joined by two very talented gentlemen, Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart, one of the original Tuskegee Airmen, and CAF Red Tail P-51 Pilot Bill Shepard. Good evening, gentlemen, and welcome to our webinar.
Good evening. How are you today?
Well, Colonel Stewart, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about your childhood and what kind of got you interested in aviation.
Well, I was born in Newport News, Virginia. I lived there about 2 years after my birth, but my parents lived near a airfield down there, Langley Field. And when they put me out in the crib there, you know, these planes from Langley Field would go flying over, and according to my parents anyway, I would try to wave at the planes and coo at them and that kind of thing. So I guess that's where the bug hit me as far as flying is concerned. At 2 years old, the parents moved to New York City. And there again, I moved about, within walking distance of an airport known as North Beach Airport. It was half military and half civilian. But in 1939, that airport was rededicated, and the name of it today is LaGuardia Airport. So I used to go over there as a kid, and I would sit near the fence there at the perimeter of the field and look at the planes taking off and landing and fantasizing about my being in the cockpit flying the plane myself. And I guess that's how the bug germinated, and World War II came along in 1941, and I decided to, knowing that I'd be drafted, I decided to take the examination as a cadet for the Air Corps, and I passed it, and after that, that was it.
So by the time you took the exam, the Tuskegee program was already underway?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yes, it was. In fact, I guess my wishes as far as becoming a pilot were a little ambitious at the time there. And the blacks in aviation at that time, where there were a few pioneers there, is that the Air Corps did not accept blacks for training as military pilots, cadets. And it wasn't until June of 1941 that they established the first class of black aviation cadets. There were 13 that were accepted at the time, and this was down near a college in Alabama by the name of Tuskegee Institute, and hence they built a field down there for the training of these African-American pilots to be, and the name was Tuskegee Army Airfield, the name taken after the town and after the school college that they had down there. As I said, the first class started in June of 41, and then, of course, in December of 41, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and that's when a couple of days later, the United States declared war, and that, again, you know the history as far as that's concerned of the United States Air Forces, and the classes continued to be established as far as Tuskegee was concerned. And I went in 1943, in the around March of 1943, and I first went to the college down there, and the Air Corps sent me to the college, Tuskegee Institute, and this was in following with the overall Air Corps at the time there, where other students that were coming in from other parts of the country, other ethnicity, I should say, were going to schools such as Harvard or Princeton or Yale and those for 6 months. And it was a program called the, I forget the name of the program now, the CTD, College Training Detachment. And it was to bring those students that had not gotten a high degree of formal education, which was required at the time to become officer in the service and a pilot. They felt as though by immersing them into a high learning tank for 6 months, as for such subjects as physics and chemistry, electronics, and others, that they would academically bring the cadets up to the point where they could start them training as in the regular pilot program, which at that time took about 10 months. It had 4 phases to it. One was a ground phase called pre-flight, and then the other 2 phases was primary, then basic, then advanced. In primary, the aircraft that I guess was more or less universal as far as the beginning was concerned was the PT-17. And when I went through, they decided to change that to the PT-19 Cornell. It was a low-wing, plywood, 2-seat and tandem, 175 horsepower inverted Ranger engine. And that consisted of a primary. Then the basic was a all-metal aircraft, the basic trainer, which was a Vultee DT-13. That was a little higher horsepower. I guess that was about 450 horsepower. And it was an enclosed canopy, all metal, aluminum, fixed landing gear, and 2-speed prop on it. And then if you were successful in getting through that stage, you'd go to your final stage, which was the T6, better known in Canada as the Harvard. And it was a North American aircraft. I guess you might say that it was just as close to a fighter aircraft as could be at the time there. And there again, it had an enclosed cockpit, 2 seats in tandem. It did have a retractable landing gear, a variable speed propeller, pitch propeller, and 650 horsepower. Once you got through there, that's it. You get your wings and you're commissioned, hopefully a second lieutenant in the Army Air Corps, and then you would start your fighter training. In my case, it was the P-40 Warhawk, and that's the one that had like the tiger shark painting on the front of the nose there. And I got, at first, 10 hours just orientation in the P-40 Warhawk, which I did solo at the time there. And there was no choice as far as solo is concerned because it was just a single seat aircraft. And when you get in there, there's nobody to show you how to do it or to demonstrate it while you're in there. You have to go ahead and lean on your previous learning and the manuals as far as describing characteristics, flight characteristics of the aircraft. And from there on, it's yours. And I had 10 hours in that. And then actually for wartime fighter training, I was transferred to Walterboro, South Carolina, where I flew the P-47 Thunderbolt and the C and D models. There I got 80 hours in the P-47, very, very fine aircraft. And once I finished there, they deemed I was ready to go overseas. And I went over as a replacement pilot for the 332nd Fighter Group, which was the all-black fighter group that was in the 15th Air Force in Italy at the time there. And bomber escort and flying P-51s. And over there, I flew the 51B and the 51C and the 51D. I had flown all 3 of those aircraft there. And I did fly 43 missions, which were high altitude bomber escort missions, and in between there, interspersed there, were a couple of missions that were photo reconnaissance that I was flying as escort for the photo reconnaissance planes, and those planes were the I'm trying to think of the British plane, the twin engine, very, very fast plywood aircraft. What was that?
The Mosquito?
Any of you?
Mosquito?
The Mosquito. That's
Yep.
Thank you. And beside the Mosquito, and then the also flew along with the some Spitfires. They were broken down into photo reconnaissance. They had camera equipment on them, and down to fighting weight, and they would dash into the target. I used to fly, like to escort them, because they would fly into the target high speed, throttles bent full forward, and go over the target, snap the pictures, and come back. Longest mission was up to Berlin. I didn't quite make Berlin. I got as far as Dresden, but that was a pretty long trip, especially as far as bomber escort is concerned, because it was about a 6.5 hour trip for me and a fighter, and anybody who's flown a fighter or a single engine like that knows 6.5 hours up there is pretty grueling, especially at high altitude. But anyway, I got as far as Dresden, and it wasn't too long after that the war was over, and I headed back home. After getting back home, the 332nd Fighter Group was reactivated in the States. Their home base became Lockbourne Air Force Base in Columbus, Ohio, which is now Rickenbacker Air Force Base. And there I was flying a very, very sweet aircraft called the P-47N. They only made 1,500 of them, and they were specifically designed for the Far East, for the eventual invasion of Japan. It was a very, very comfortable plane, and in fact, so comfortable that they had a built-in autopilot, and that's a fighter with an autopilot. And then they had cushions on the seats and armrests that you could pull down. And actually, if you didn't watch yourself, you could fall asleep, and the plane flying itself. I wanted to say fall asleep and flying itself because it had an automatic pilot, believe it or not. Automatic pilot. It was about a 2,500 horsepower Pratt & Whitney engine on it. Firepower was tremendous. 8 50 caliber machine guns, and I guess with full armament, I guess it must have weighed about 15,000, maybe more than that, pounds there. Fast aircraft. It was just about as fast as the P-51. The only thing, it just didn't have the turning capabilities of the 51 there. The 51 is a very high rate of roll on it. The P-47N did not have a very high rate of roll. But other than that, with that 25 horsepower engine, it was really, really fast. Hamilton Standard prop on it. And that aircraft actually was the aircraft I was flying in, and I was fortunate enough to be chosen towards the end of my career to be a participant in the first post-war fighter gunnery meet that the Air Force had at the time. I think they had something like 12 squadrons throughout the continental United States. And the Hoyt Vandenberg, who was the commanding general of the Air Force at the time, decided he'd like to resurrect the games that the fighters squadrons used to play before the war, before World War II. And that would be to display their weapons, actually shoot at these targets and go through similar maneuvers for a period of 10 days. And the winners would be given a trophy and declared as winners there. In our case, or in all cases with the United States Air Force, they chose 3 participants, 3 from each fighter group, to compete. And they decided that the space that we compete in would be in the environs of Las Vegas, Nevada. It was about 40 miles out in the desert around Frenchman Flats, and it was the competition consisted of aerial gunnery at 20,000 feet, aerial gunnery at 10,000 feet, dive bombing, skip bombing, strafing, and rocketry. Because the F-86s that were competing at the time there, the jets there and the F-84s, they were not equipped at that time to handle rockets. So they decided to split the 12 groups up into a group of, declare the winners in the jet class, which was 7 of them, 7 of the groups there, and 5 of the groups in the piston class, which I was in at the time there. But getting back to the P-47, the 3 pilots that were chosen from the 332nd Fighter Group, the Red Tails that we were known, and also as the Tuskegee Airmen, happened to win the meet, and it was the P-47, and that was that I accredit a lot of the reasons for the display that we performance that we had at the meet there. People ask me oftentimes now, well, what plane did you like best, and I'd say, well, there were 2 of them. There was the P-47N, I have to classify it as N, and the P-51. And I said the reason being is that as far as high altitude bomber escort missions and that type of thing, I take the P-51. But however, for strafing and for close support work on the ground there, I would take the P-47. It was, I'll tell you, today it's comparable to the A-10, which is a formidable ground support aircraft there. But that's what I would compare it to as far as an upgrade to today's aircraft. That was about it. I got out of the service in 1950, and I tried the airlines, but I was not accepted, and only because of my color at the time. But that was obviated a couple of years later by them starting to choose somebody such that you'll find today as you'll find African Americans flying in all of the airlines that you have in the country. And not only that, but to show you how far they have come, as the nation has come as far as the pilots are concerned. There was a flight that was going from Hartsfield to somewhere in Kentucky, I think, and in the cockpit were pilot and co-pilot, and both of them were black. And not only were both of them black, but they were both women. So anyway, that was quite a thing. But that was Delta Airline. Okay. That situation occurred. But anyway, since not being accepted at the time, and only because I was summarily rejected when I applied at the two aircraft companies there, and they had offices in New York. I decided that one of the things that might be holding me back as far as my profession, newly chosen profession would be concerned, would be my minuscule or lack of high-grade formal education, and I guess what I meant by that is college. So I sort of took a young towards engineering, and I applied to New York University College of Engineering at the time, and I went there and went through evening school there. It took me 6.5 years, but I did get my degree in mechanical engineering, and I moved up the line and mechanical engineering from that time, and I enjoyed it very much. In fact, an opportunity came along for me to go back in the Air Force, and I was enjoying the engineering so much, I decided to stay with that because I could do two things. I could do the engineering, I could fool around with a little bit of flying also. As I can tell you, as far as Bill Shepard is concerned, you know, he came and I was in my 80s, I had retired and that type of thing, but I guess it was in the, I guess I was in my 80s, and he picked up a Harvard in Jackson Airport in Michigan here, and he was going to fly it back to Detroit. And this is a plane that was bought by the Tuskegee Airmen Museum, and he was gracious enough. I got in the back seat, and he was gracious enough after he took off to let me get some stick time. And so I flew along in formation with another craft that was flying in the air with us. But I told Bill a couple of times I really enjoyed that flight. It was really nice getting back in the T6 and flying it. And it felt just as comfortable in the back seat because I instructed in the T6 for a number of years. So I felt right at home. The only difference was getting a little older. I got a little tired, and I told Bill, you better take over. Just a little too tired back there. But it was a lot of fun. And then what had happened, just prior to that time there, is that the museum, the Tuskegee Airmen Museum, was given 4 aircraft from the Colorado Springs, the Air Force there. They had some aircraft, they were motor gliders, and that they used for orientation for their cadets that they had out there. And these other planes were getting, well, they weren't state of the art, and the Air Force wanted state of the art, so they decided to give these motor gliders away. I think they had 13 of them, and they gave them to various museums and colleges and that type of thing. But anyway, the Tuskegee Airmen Museum in Detroit got 4 of these aircraft. But the only thing about it is the guys brought the planes in there and they left, and there was nobody to fly them at the time. Nobody knew how to fly them. So I decided at 82 that I'd go and get my commercial pilot's license and gliders. So that's what I did. Wow. And I really enjoyed that because I used to take the neighborhood kids up and fly them around. And I did have that hat on, you know, for the, what's the organization?
The Young Eagles program.
Young Eagles, yes, it was a Young Eagles program. And used to fly the neighborhood kids around, and I got just as much of a kick out of that as I think the kids did. And then, of course, about 88 years old, I felt as though I was just about had it as far as my physical alacrity was concerned there. So I sort of gave up the flying, not so, I gave up the solo flying. I still had the privilege of going up with guys like Bill and some of the other guys, and actually went up in their CAF 51. I've been in that, I guess, about 3 or 4 times, and I've got some stick time in it and just enjoyed myself like mad, you know. So right now I'm sitting back. Well, you've got a book there that has the story in it about some of my exploits, and also history of the Tuskegee Airmen and that sort of thing. And up until last March, or March a year ago, I was out on a book signing tour going throughout the country. And then the COVID came along, and I've been confined ever since. I'm bunkered down in my house here and out on the garden there, and that's it. So let me just say it's a pleasure sitting here talking to you guys and seeing Bill again. And anyway, that's it.
Well, I think there's more to the story that we'll explore in just a moment. Bill, just want to bring you in, and we heard Lieutenant Colonel Stewart talk about the training that he went through. Primary, basic, advanced. But the training for you in the modern civilian world to get into the cockpit of a P-51 kind of follows the same sort of pattern, doesn't it?
Yeah, I got my pilot license young when I was 16 years old in Dallas, Texas, Arlington actually. I went the traditional route where kids go through the civilian training, and Cessna pilot training school, and work my way up to different aircraft in that regard. And then I went and finished school here in Canada, where I currently am right now, and got my Canadian pilot license and continued on flying in different aircraft at that point in time. But to kind of fast forward the clock, I had been through all the paces and commercial and night flying and all the things, instrument flying, what have you. But I came in contact with the Canadian Harbour Aircraft Association that flies the Canadian Harbors, or the NAT-6, as the U.S. would call the variant, NAT-6. So being part of the Canadian Harbour Association, I was able to come and accomplish Harvard pilot and a formation pilot, and be part of the group up here and do many, many air shows. And where I had my opportunity to transition to the Mustang was at the Geneseo Air Show, Geneseo, New York, which is the greatest air show on turf, is their slogan. And that's where I met Doug Rosendahl as my mentor as far as the P-51 to bridge the gap. I was doing a lot of things with the Tuskegee Airmen group at that point in time, with the Rochester detachment, the Rochester wing, and doing a lot of volunteer work with young kids and so forth, and getting involved with the T6 or the Harvard, and talking about aviation and the greatest generation, because you're talking to Colonel Stewart, you can see why they called them the greatest generation. Well, at that point in time, I was tapped on the shoulder by the CAF and said, hey, we're looking to start a red tail program, and we're looking for some pilots, and you're been flying the T6 for many, many years, and would you like to come over our program? I said, you got to be kidding. I thought Doug was pulling my leg. And we went back and forth and bantered back and forth, and I said, I'm not going to beg you. And I said, if you want to come fly, fly. And the reason I'm going on along the story, because I gained my strength through the Tuskegee moment, or Tuskegee Airmen and things, and kind of use them as a kind of a stepping stone. That when you belong to the CAF, there's a financial or donations you have to do and have you, and jumps through the hoops, and they're quite a burden financially and things. And so I had to sit and think about this and give Doug a call and say, hey, I'm ready to go. And I had to meet those obligations. Well, like anybody else who has a bucket of money sitting around, that kind of thing. And I literally had to go on a fundraising campaign and wash airplanes and wash cars and things, and had some sponsors, and was able to meet those obligations and start my training on the P-51 Mustang. And I was able to train in the Mustang. We actually did the training in Michigan, where we were able to solo the plane at that point in time, and that was history. And I've been able to fly the Mustang for about it's over 10 years now, I guess, flying the Red Tail Squadron from coast to coast to coast. So it's been a great opportunity, and met a lot of great airmen and a lot of great stories. And it's not just what they did during the war; it's what they've done after the war. These gentlemen, were leaders, doctors, lawyers, engineers, teachers, and that's a part two of the great story of these definitely leaders of the community. So it's been an honor to be able to share the story with the airmen.
And you bring up a great point. Not only the accomplishments during the war, but what so many of the airmen did in helping continue to build our society, and help make things and do things that we enjoy today. And it's just every one of the airmen that I've met, they just have fascinating stories, not only during the war, as I said, but also post-war, and like Lieutenant Colonel Stewart, thank you for flying Young Eagles and inspiring a new generation as well. I mean, that's a very important thing, but also the Red Tail program itself, Bill, that has been an ongoing program from the CAF that really also reaches out to young people. Well, not only young people, but some of us who are a little older, but using the story of the Red Tails to inspire and ask people to think about it and reach for their dreams.
It's a great opportunity. It's a great story that the Red Tail Squadron is doing to help support the story of the Tuskegee Airmen, to aim high and believe in themselves, use your brain, never quit and expect to win. The principles the airmen should live by. And the Rise Above tour is going all across the country, the U.S. and Canada, spreading out to over 500,000 kids have gone through the exhibit, a live exhibit talking about the aircraft and the airmen and what they've done and their contribution before, during, and after the war. And it's not just a white-black story, it's a story about rising above. And so no matter what circumstances you find yourself in, you can use the strength of the airmen to use to rise above their circumstances to be able to achieve their goals. And it's a great story. And once again, it's been an honor to be able to share that across the country. One of the things, as far as an impact, I always get excited about when the young kids go through, anybody goes through the exhibit and sees the aircraft, sees the exhibit, the vignette movie you have. We give kids a set of dog tags, a rise above set of dog tags, which have the 6 principles on the back. And one of the most rewarding things is doing an air show and going to the community all across this country. And we have our downtime when we're going to the local store, getting involved, and you see some youth, a child or kid at the Walmart or whatever store you go to, wearing their dog tags that they had gone to the exhibit, and things that days after they've experienced and stuff, they had that clutching and clutching that the 6 principles behind them, and be able to live and continue on with that. So that's really exciting. Until I'm kind of charged up by it, that we're able to give back to the community and share this message.
That's excellent. What was the first time that you two met? Was that the T6 flight?
Well, I think that was about the T6 flight, I believe. Once again, I was involved with the Red Tail, not only the Red Tail Squadron, but the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated, and also the Detroit chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen, the Detroit Museum, the national headquarters of the Tuskegee Airmen Museum is in Detroit. And they do an excellent job, once again, telling the story, and they have the motor gliders there and the T6 and some other aircraft, and they promote in the general area as far as the greater Detroit area. So being here 2 hours away across the Canadian border, I often go down and volunteer with the organization down there, and that's where Colonel Stewart lives with his family and things. So we cross paths there quite often, and Oshkosh, of course, and what have you. So, and so I've been very blessed to be able to be part of his life.
Well, Lieutenant Colonel Stewart, we need to go back to a photo that we saw earlier, and that is it's actually a painting. But tell us a little bit about the story behind that mission.
Well, that mission is a mission that took place on April 1st, 1945. April 1st, 1945 happened to be April Fool's Day, but it also happened to be Easter Sunday. And we had a mission at that time to Austria and up near Vienna, not too far from Vienna. We were told at the time there is that when the bombers finished dropping their load there, that there were a flight of us of 8 out of the squadron there that may stay behind and look for targets of opportunity. And targets of opportunity means interdicting any type of targets that would diminish the warfare, create a problem as far as the enemy was concerned. And that would be shooting up barges on the Danube, shooting up railroad cars, other rolling stock, and of course, engaging enemy aircraft, and namely other enemy fighters there. So we were on the sweep, and we were near Lens, near one of the airdromes near there, and lo and behold, we were looking for trouble, and we found it, and we ran into a horde of FW-190s, and there a big fight started at the time there, and of course the night formation that we were in at the time was completely broken up. I mean, we chose our targets, or we were chosen as targets, either one or both of them happened there. But in the end, 3 of the guys, there were actually 7 of us, the 8 that were supposed to go, one of them had the engine trouble before we ran into any trouble there, and headed back home. So there were 7 of us, but 3 of us got shot down. And the luckiest one, I guess I call him the luckiest one, he limped home, but got as far as the island of Viz out in the Adriatic. It was one of the Yugoslavian islands there, but it was captured by the friendly forces, and they used it as a way station for planes that might be in trouble. So he got home okay. The second guy was from Boston, Massachusetts, and he was shot down, and he was evidently killed instantly. And there was a third that got shot down, but he managed to bail out. His name was Walter Manning, and he bailed out very close to Linz Aerodrome there. And when he landed, there was a mob that was waiting for him as he came down, and they took him to the local jailhouse in Linz. And 2 nights later, I don't know whether it's the same mob, but I got this from the intelligence people later on, that they had broken into the jail, and they had taken Walter out, and they lynched him from a lamppost out in the street. And it just so happens that something like 70 or less than that, maybe 50 some years later, I got invited to Austria, and my daughter and I went over, and it happened to be the anniversary. This was, I told you that this fighting occurred on the 1st of April of 1945, and I was invited by the Austrian government to return in Austria, and that was April the 1st, 2018, which happened to also be Easter Sunday and April Fool's Day. And what they had done is that the government had did a real big job in locating not only Walter Manning's, what happened to Walter Manning as far as going down and being lynched, but this happened to a number of aircrew members who happened to go down in Austria. And this includes South Africans, this includes New Zealanders, this includes Australians, and all of the United Nations that were fighting in that area at the time there. Air forces, of course. And they were doing a study and trying to research all of the incidents such as what happened to Walter Manning had taken place. And as a result, they had found that I was the last living member of that flight that had that incident in Linz there, and they invited me over for a memorial at the grave of Walter Manning. And they put on quite a display, and it was very, very lovely. They invited my daughter along with me. She served as my, she helped me along in getting through and all that sort of thing. What had happened during the time is that during the fighting, and I didn't see any of our other aircraft at the time, but during the fighting, is I happened to sneak up, and I don't think they saw me, on 2 FW-190s in formation. And I was coming up on them pretty fast, and I was about level there. And I don't think they saw me at first there because they didn't take any evasive movements at the time there, but I had a zero deflection shot on one of these guys, and of course I saw stuff coming off the plane there, and as soon as that happened, his wingman pulled off into a tight turn, and I pulled off, and I got inside of the turn there, and I hit him also because I could see pieces coming off from the craft. Well, at that time there, I saw these traces come by me, and looked back, and lo and behold, here's this guy, and he's got a dead beat on me. He's got me dead to rights, and mouth turned dry, and you know, I really thought I had it. I thought I had bought the farm, and I did a split S, I guess it was, and I went down close to the ground, and anything to get away from this guy, and I was pulling it in real tight. Well, he was coming down on me, I guess, at a steep angle in a dive there, and I was in a very, very tight turn, and evidently he either lost control or he had a high-speed stall, and I don't know whether he was fledgling pilot, and that's what you ran into a lot over there at the time there. You know, those guys that were real good, you know, they most of them had gotten killed, you know, and the motto that they had at the German Air Force at the time is you fly until you die. And so, you know, probably a couple of kids with just a few hours in that FW-190, and that's the only way I can look at it and just say that I had my lucky stars that, you know, I didn't run into some of those more experienced guys or something, you know. So that was that situation where you see the three fingers up here when I got back to the intelligence and told them that what had happened, and they took the gun camera information and all that sort of stuff. I mentioned the guys that went in on my tail there. So they said, well, that's your third victory. And I didn't understand what he meant at first there. He says, well, you know, he went in as a result of your engagement with him. So we're going to give you credit for 3. So I got credit for 3, and that's why you see the 3 fingers up there. And this was taken from a photograph that was taken from a photograph that was taken about 3 or 4 days after the incident. And this is most of it is a painting. It's all a painting that was done at the time there. But that's a long-winded way of telling you what had happened in Vienna and in Austria.
That's quite all right. It's a very riveting story, and it has some elements to it that I don't think we've heard before, and which leads me to another question. With you joining the Army Air Force in 1943, and you were there until 1950. You were there for the desegregation of the armed forces. What was that transition like from the inside?
Well, it was more words than deeds at the time there. This took place in 1947, and Truman, by an executive order, said that there will be no more segregation in the Air Force. And of course, what was the Air Corps at the time and part of the Army became autonomous. It became the United States Air Force, and it was on an equal footing with the Navy and the Army and the Marines, that type of thing. But Truman said, effective this date, and I forget the date now, but there'll be no more segregation. But those were just the words, that's all, because I was at a segregated base in Lockburn, Ohio, until the summer of 1949. And it was at that time that all of the personnel on the base there, that's the pilots, that's the cooks, that's the doctors, all of the people on the base there were transferred to the 4 corners of the earth, the different 4 corners of the earth there, for complete integration at the time there. So that was I guess the first real actual integration that took place. And as I said again, that was took place in June of 1949. So that was a few years after the Truman had made his declaration there.
And you mentioned 1949 when you and your teammates won the gunnery competition.
1 month, 1 month after that the desegregation took place. 1 month after we won the trophy there.
And then there's a story that goes along with that as well, of that trophy relatively just disappeared for quite a few years.
It did. It was in the commanding general's headquarters up in his office, I was told, for about a year, and then it disappeared. Where it went, I don't know. We go fast forward to 2008, I guess it is, and young lady by the name of Zelly Orr made it her business to research this whole thing and find out what happened to that trophy. And she was able to locate it at a warehouse at Wright-Patterson Field, Ohio. And it was in a box there, and she brought it to the attention of the Air Force at the time there, and they resurrected the target, and now it's sitting into the big Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson Field in perpetuity. It's I happened to be coming through there about a year and a half ago, and happened to go through part of the museum that they have there, and there it was sitting in there. So any of you that go through Wright-Patterson Field can go ahead and see the trophy and some of the artifacts around there and some of the other tributes to the Tuskegee Airmen.
After the war was over, you received the Distinguished Flying Cross and also the Air Medal with 6 oak leaf clusters. But
Yes.
you also received a Presidential Gold Medal several years after that from President Bush at the time.
Well, yes, and that was awarded to the okay, that was awarded to the Tuskegee Airmen en masse. It was also, the 332nd Fighter Group for the period of I don't know the time that they formed, that had the first black cadets go into the Air Force, and until I guess 1949, where they were disbanded. But yes, and you can see Nancy Pelosi, and you can see President up there. And, there's Charles McGee, and I think that's me down in front there. But anyway, it was nice meeting the president, and it was a nice honor. But it was an honor given to the Tuskegee Airmen en masse. All right.
And then we talked about the book a little bit, but what was the kind of the impetus behind sitting down with Philip Handelman and writing a book?
Well, Handelman is a pretty well-known aviation historian and writer, and he had written a couple of books before this, and he writes a number of articles for some of the aviation periodicals. But he lives right maybe about 30 miles north of me here. And we made an early acquaintance, and he has what he calls a sky ranch. He has a 169-acre plot that he bought, and he laid it out, and he had a ranch, beautiful ranch built on it. And also the ranch has a hangar next to it, and he has 2 aircraft. He has a Harvard, and I forget the other aircraft that he has there, but I met him when I had moved to the Detroit area, and he was a part of the Tuskegee Airmen organization. And after we got acquainted, he says, "Why don't you come on up and fly with me sometime?" Which I did. And then after I got my commercial license with the glider, I would fly up there, and he'd get in the glider and we'd fly around a bit, or I'd get in the Harvard with him and we'd fly around. Not the Harvard, I'm talking about the PT-17. And we would fly around quite a bit in that. And one day, he's on the staff, some staff out at the Selfridge Field out here. And one day he picked me up to take me on over to this meeting they're going to have there. And he says, "Harry," he says, "if you don't mind," he says, "I'd like to write a book about you." I said, "Well, be my guest." And that's what he did. He's a prolific writer. He's very good. And I gave him carte blanche with with the house here, with all of the archives I had and everything else. And he put it all together, and he put the book together, and it the book turned out pretty well. And as I said, he does a good job. And the nice thing about the book, it's a little bit of my biography in there, but it's a lot about the beginnings of blacks in the Air Force at the time, and a lot about the Tuskegee Airmen, and even a lot of technical things about some of the aircraft that were flying during wartime there, such as the Harvard and the BT-13 and the Cornell. And He's got a beautiful, world-renowned archival and historical place as far as aircraft books are concerned and that type of thing. So I wish I could mention his name and honor him enough, because it's not because he wrote about me, but the job that he did and his knowledge and his love for aircraft and especially military aircraft. And so that's Philip Handelman.
Awesome. And for both of you, you've been involved with the Tuskegee Museum in the Detroit area. Can you, Bill, can you just elaborate a little bit more about what's involved, or the kinds of displays or things they have there at the museum?
Mainly the museum in Detroit is a flying museum. There's two components. There's the Tuskegee Airmen chapter, which has the museum in Old Fort Wayne, which has just moved to, I believe, Colonel Stewart, to the Ford Center as well. Yes. For their static displays, and they have correct, yeah, and then they have an operational museum at the Coleman Young Airport. So they're doing their best to tell the story, and I think there's a lot of people that have their hat in the ring as far as telling the story of the Tuskegee Airmen. So we're kind of honored to be in that circle of people. For the Commemorative Air Force, as an example, it started back with Don Hines. Well, I'll back up a little bit more. If not familiar with the Commemorative Air Force, the really exciting part about it is, it goes coast to coast to coast. They're in 25 states, have 78 different units, and the Commemorative Air Force Red Tail Squadron is just one of those 78 units. They're focusing on the Tuskegee Airmen story. And the effort and time of dedication of the volunteers of the Red Tail Squadron, as many of their volunteers, over 12,000 volunteers with the Commemorative Air Force, are stewards of all the stories of World War II, of all the stories of the Greatest Generation, and the importance that the Commemorative Air Force is putting into keeping that hope and keeping those memories alive is pretty awe-inspiring. But for the Tuskegee program in particular, what's exciting is we've been able to capture the essence of the story, not the whole story, the essence of the story, and package it into a one-of-a-kind. Only way you can see it is through the Commemorative Air Force Red Tail Squadron full wrap around 160-degree theater that travels all across this country, and a mobile movie system and stuff. It'd be an experiential way to see or get your appetite whet about the Tuskegee Airmen, one of the people, the Greatest Generation. And we also have an authentic P-51 Mustang, the Red Tail Mustang, named the Tuskegee Airmen to help honor the airmen as well. So you can see not only the aircraft fly, but you can get a vignette to help inspire or maybe drive you to your Tuskegee moment. And one of the most exciting parts about what we get to do is we had a young lady go through the exhibit a while back, and we asked her, what did you learn about this exhibit? What did you learn about the Tuskegee Airmen? She says, well, I need to work hard, dream big, and never give up. And it's like, wow, what more about hitting the message on point that we inspire youth to dream big, work hard, and never give up. And so that's one of the rewarding things about being involved in a program such as this. And it started back with Don Hines, who's one of our members in the Minnesota wing, who saw this and saw that we need to create something like this and move it forward across the country. So, and Commemorative Air Force, once again, investing, double downing on it, is now introducing the Red Tail Rise Above Theater that is now opening up in Dallas, Texas at the Dallas, Texas Air Base. So that's more to come as far as the exciting chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen story told by the CAF. So, wow, you can't ask for anything more. We lost you there, Steve.
We could ask for more air shows and more opportunities to see the exhibit and the airplane around the country, and hopefully 2021 is we start to open things up again, will be a harbinger of good things to come in the future.
Yeah. Well, one of the ways we help solve that is on the redtail.org site, redtail.org, is a virtual museum. And what we found out that there's a lot of people like myself and my personal man cave have many artwork that's signed by airmen and what have you. But we found that a lot of people have lots to share across this country and stories to tell about the airmen and artifacts, what have you. We invite them to share those stories and share those artifacts through the redtail.org website and be able to participate. Everyone can participate in the virtual museum to show what you have in those. So no more trophies get lost as far as in a basement or in a box. So we're definitely helping that. So But we're just one of many people telling the story and being stewards of this stuff. And we're very honored, Colonel Stewart, for what you've done and what you've done for our country and for the people. And still to this day, you inspire. I know you do that for me. So once again, thank you very much.
Well, and we've got a picture now of Colonel Stewart in the rear seat of the P-51 Red Tail, the C model. Colonel Stewart, any thoughts on that flight?
Yeah, there were controls in there, and I asked. I don't know who I was up with at the time there, but we were somewhere around Atlanta, and I guess we were just below the cloud base or something like that. And the pilot says, "Well, do what you want." So I did a roll. I think I was out of the or in the incorrect airspace to do that kind of thing. But he just asked me and swore me to silence there. I wouldn't tell anybody about that, you know. He was
nobody's listening.
Yeah.
And don't tell anybody, nobody's listening.
Well, before we've just got a couple of minutes left. I want to bring up we do have some upcoming events for the Rise Above for the trailer and the P-51 Mustang. So again, Bill, what's the website address so they can get all the information on upcoming shows and the virtual museum and lots of other information about Red Tail?
Yeah, redtail.org is fairly straightforward, and you can get a hold of me personally if you have any questions at bill@redtail.org or info@redtail.org as far as any other information. But the website's pretty impressive. A lot of volunteers behind the scenes done a lot of work. We have a volunteer chairman that likes to sign up people that want to help us on the road. So we're a traveling exhibit. So it's a multi experiential movie system that travels across the country, and as well as the P-51 Mustang. So great things to see. And the airmen often join us on the trip as well across the country. So.
All right. Well, there have not been a whole lot of questions that have come up from our audience, but what is coming in the comment section is thank you to both of you for the presentation, for Colonel Stewart for being one of the first to break so many barriers, and kudos to you, Bill, for being one of the people who's making sure that we continue to share the legacy. So the audience has definitely appreciated your time tonight, and as do I. And Colonel Stewart, will just give you an opportunity to any final thoughts as we wrap up tonight.
Well, I guess that's about it. I guess I didn't say as far as the demographics concerned there. People wonder about the Tuskegee Airmen and how many of them were there, and quite a number there, and I'd say about 15 or 16,000. Now, not all of them were pilots, and of that number, there were less than 1,000 who were pilots, and even of that number of 1,000, less than 1,000 pilots, only 350 of those went overseas. Of that 350 that went overseas, 81 lost their lives overseas. 35 were shot down as prisoners of war. 7 of those that were did not become prisoners of war but were shot down were escapees. They managed to escape out of the enemy territory and get back to friendly territory. Red tails, everybody had a distinctive marking on their tails in the combat theater, and ours happened to be red. There was no pejorative or anything like that in there. It was just that that was the color that was chosen at the time. The sister fighter group next to us had yellow tails, and then there was another one down the road there that had checkerboard, and there's another down the road there that had candy stripes. So it was strictly for identification when we had radio silence, that's all. And what else can I say? Of the combat pilots, there are 8 that are left today. Out of the 350, there are 8 that are left today. And there are 2 in Michigan here, and I think there are a couple in Chicago, and that's about it. But they're all in their 90s, anywhere from 95 to 100 and 101.
All right. Well, with that, sir, we are going to salute you and your fellow airmen for all that you've done for all of us, not only, as we said earlier, during the war, but in the post-war era to help make this country what it is. And we hope, Bill and Colonel Stewart, we're going to see you at some air shows later on this year and in the years to come, and continue to share the story of the Tuskegee Airmen with future generations. Thank you both for joining us this evening.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us. God bless.
Right.
And thank you to the audience for joining us for this Warbird Tube webinar. If you have any suggestions for future topics or guests that you think would be of interest, please drop Leah Block a note at media@cafhq.org. We'll be back next Wednesday night, 7 o'clock Central Time. Until then, thank you again to our guests, Bill Shepard and Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart. And for the Commemorative Air Force, I'm Steve Buss. Have a great night.
Thank you.